So this is part 2 of the influential horror video that Ray and I did. In this video, you'll see that the camera angle is a little bit different. I thought it worked better. Also, the camera that we used at the first part of the video, we actually switched cameras because that camera just kept cutting out on us every 10 minutes. So I thought I would use a different camera, and I think this works a lot better. And where we're going to pick up in this video is where we're talking about, he went into his number 10 of influences, and he talked about Halloween and Friday the 13th, and I sort of piggybacked off that, and I started talking about Psycho. So that's where we're going to be picking up as this video begins. So I hope everyone enjoys this. Please stay tuned. Yeah, Psycho, I think, is probably one of the most influential films in the genre. Especially I think it did sort of lay the groundwork because it was so influential to John Carpenter. And John Carpenter did make Halloween, and even one of the main characters, Donald Pleasance's character is Sam Loomis, and there is Sam Loomis in Psycho, who is Janet Leigh's boyfriend.
Absolutely.
So there are ties there, and Janet Leigh's daughter is in
and
Halloween.
His weapon of choice.
Yeah.
It all ties together.
But I also think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another one that has, is just, it's such a classic film. Just for its time when it came out in the 70s, it was such a different type of film. But it doesn't have a lot of violence in it. It's more implied violence. Even though there are meat hooks and guy with a chainsaw, you really don't see a lot of on-screen carnage.
The creepiest moment in that movie is when the guy comes in, Leatherface opens up the door, and just crack, and you hear the skull crack, and he just falls to the floor like a sack of beans.
And he shakes. Yeah, I just remember that.
That is the creepiest moment in the movie. It's even creepier than when they're eating people.
Yeah, because it's just so it's so visceral and in your face. And
absolutely,
there's no apologies about it at all. But the fact that it's also tied to Psycho, and the fact that it comes from the same source material, it is based around in terms of the Ed Gein murders, and that was the influence for Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho. And then you also, because Ed Gein was, known for making furniture out of human bones, and he stuffed people, his own mother he stuffed. So and he was wearing skin, the
so they incorporated
it all into that.
Number 9 on my list is probably a name you've never heard of. I'm going to bet money.
Well, okay. I'll take that bet.
All righty. I have $5 in my wallet right now.
All right.
Okay.
$5.
$5. And he's a French filmmaker from the 1910s named Georges Melies.
Okay. You won.
Okay.
I've never heard of him.
I won. Don't worry. I know. So Georges Méliès was a French filmmaker from the 1910s. Wasn't exclusive horror, but did do a couple of short horror films, because all the movies back then were only 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, they were just they're like what shorts are now. It's
exactly.
They were that was it.
Georges Méliès was basically the innovator of camera's special effects. He often referred to as the original movie magician. He was before anybody else. He was the guy using foreground and background as an optical illusion to make something look bigger. Kind of like nowadays people taking a picture with just the right angle. It looks like they're putting bunny ears on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that.
Yeah.
So he was using that in his movies, and it was brilliant. He was the originator of using dissolves and jump cuts and things of that nature. He did a horrific movie called The Giant Devil, I believe, and where he himself, I think, played Mephistopheles.
Oh, wow.
And with the way that the set was constructed, and using the illusion of foreground and background, it made this devil character, and actually you can sort of see it in the video right now, made this devil character look like he's 20 feet tall right next to this guy, normal-sized human, but the way they had to look at each other, they had to look as if they were on the same eye line.
Wow.
So he was the master of that. And a lot of the kind of special effects he used, you found in later horror films. People learned it, they perfected it, and they used it. He would do the slow dissolves of making something invisible become visible, or something that was visible become invisible.
Wow.
Well, they take that, they perfect it, and you have the Invisible Man.
Wow.
With
And
Claude
so if
Rains.
it weren't for George Melies, you wouldn't have the Invisible Man. You wouldn't have the Wolfman uses slow dissolves.
Yes.
To make him get hairier and hairier and hairier.
Yeah, because that's how they did it, and that's why, like, with going a little bit further with, like, American Werewolf in London, that's why they wanted to actually show it, because John Landis says in the past it was always like the dissolve. Like, you know, you would slowly see it happen. He wanted it to feel like you're feeling what this guy's going through.
The best dissolve that they ever did, showing somebody go from human into monster. Have you ever seen the 37, 38, Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
I haven't.
Then go YouTube it, and all you have to really YouTube is Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, transformation scene. Right after he drinks the potion, literally looking straight at the camera, turns into Mr. Hyde right in front of your face. And the dissolves are so perfect, it looks seamless.
That's amazing.
It looks,
they could do that.
It was almost like CGI or something, you know?
But
it was all editing. It was all editing, and it was all slow dissolves, and he just literally turns into Mr. Hyde in front of your very eyes. It's one of the freakiest moments in classic horror history, and one of the most innovative uses of dissolve and editing, you know. And so, but if it weren't for George Méliès doing it back in the 1910s, we wouldn't have it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd have to check that out, because I love just the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
Amazing.
Hyde.
Well, there's a reason why he won the Best Actor Oscar award for that performance.
Really?
Yeah. It's, I think, the only time in history that anybody won a Best Acting Oscar for playing, for being in a horror movie.
In a horror film, yeah. Because
the only time.
The Oscars don't like horror films. I mean, even with Silence of the Lambs, they don't call it a horror film.
No.
They call it like a thriller.
Psychological
thriller.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's a horror film.
It's a horror film.
Yeah. To go into influences, I think next on my list, and it's a movie I've talked about before, is American Werewolf in London.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, you know, that film as well as The Howling, because you did have Rick Baker's influence on both. You know, he designed the werewolves, but Rob Bottin actually took over and did The Howling while Rick Baker went and did American Werewolf. But those transformation scenes in those films, and, you know, I think that even to this day, there isn't a better werewolf transformation scene than the one in American Werewolf in London. You feel...
I gotta agree.
You feel that. Like, you feel the pain he's going through. Everything he's going through, because they said they wanted it to look like it would hurt if you were turning into a dog.
Yeah, your
type
spine's
hound.
changing, your muscles are changing.
And the fact that they shot it all in harsh light. It wasn't shot in darkness, it was shot in a big lit room.
Yes.
And I just thought that, you know, just amazing. And they had to do it in reverse. So, like, he starts actually hairy, and then they scale it back and scale it back and scale it back. And it's just how they were able to achieve that, and the fact that Rick Baker did win the Oscar for that, which he so rightfully deserved.
Completely.
But, you know, I think, you know, those type of effects, and I'm glad that with, like, The Walking Dead and Greg Nicotero doing practical effects, even though there is CGI used in some of the Walking Dead scenes, I think that practical effects will always stand the test of time as opposed to computer generated.
Absolutely.
I think if they can meld the two together, I think you have a more successful piece.
And I think an example of that is the remake of The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro.
Which I liked.
I liked it
it a lot. A lot of people didn't see it because I think it came out... I remember, and this is, you know, I'm not trying to bash anybody, fans of Twilight, but I remember when...
Bash away.
But... I'm too nice. But,
I'm not. Twilight sucks.
Okay, you've heard it here.
Do something.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Calm down.
We're good.
Down.
Okay.
No, we're good. But calm blue ocean. Yes. But yeah, when that came out, a lot of people were looking for a romantic type of Wolfman movie. They didn't realize that it was a remake of a historic, you know, classic universal
horror film.
And I think that that's sort of, it's a tragedy that film didn't do better and catch on, because Rick Baker did do the makeup in that as well.
Yes.
I mean, the transformation scenes were done with CGI, but I think, again, they had a good blending. They blended the special effects with the practical effects. And I think that's what makes
seamlessly,
it. Yeah, but I think
great.
that's what makes a good film. When you do all CGI, it just doesn't work. And I think
No,
it's
it
just
doesn't.
it looks like a
Case in
cartoon.
point, the werewolves in Van Helsing.
Oh, they're horrible.
They're awful.
I hate that movie.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard it here.
Yeah,
I
he
do
hates
not
it.
like. I do not like Van Helsing.
The only reason I hesitate to say that I like it as a horror film. I like it as just a fun film.
Yeah.
In general, because it's a throwback to the old Universal monster mashup films like House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula,
Frankenstein meets the Wolfman,
Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. All
those
of
are
that.
Great.
Yeah, so it reminds me of that. So that's why I like to watch.
It started
Van
like
Helsing.
that for me. Like I like the opening and things like that, but I just didn't feel like it retained that feeling to me. I don't know. Maybe I need to give it another chance, but I just I never was a big fan of it.
Yeah. Number 8, all of the German expressionist artists to come out of Germany, especially in the 1920s, and their silent films. And I'm talking directors, I'm talking producers, directors of photography, cinematographers, cameramen, actors, such names as Paul Wegener, who did The Golem, were Robert Veen, F.W. Murnau, Kurt Siodmak, who started out as a camera person and then did screenplays such as The Wolfman and Bride of the Gorilla, one of his best. I picked it up at the 99-cent store.
I just heard about that one tonight.
The actor Conrad Veidt, and their movies. Think of Nosferatu.
Nosferatu is a great film.
It's an amazing film. It was almost didn't see the light of day because Bram Stoker's widow sued them for copyright infringements.
Wow.
They took the story of Dracula, set it in Germany, changed all the characters' names, but it was still Dracula.
Yeah, but
so she sued and won. All prints were to be destroyed, but luckily some film pirates saved some copies, and we have it to this day.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Even back then, that kind of stuff
Even
was
back
going
then.
on. Yeah.
Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah, that's a movie I've always wanted to see, and I've never seen it.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see it. I've seen images of it. And it just looks very, very deranged.
It's very deranged. I would say it's horrific at points, but I wouldn't call it a pure horror film. But there's other ones too, like Waxworks is a great one, where all of the characters in the wax museum come to life. And one of them, I believe is supposed to be Jack the Ripper, and so there's the horror aspect for that movie. The Man Who Laughs is a great one, and most of those star the actor Conrad Veidt, who unfortunately didn't have a very big career in America, but at least he got to be in Casablanca. So,
oh wow,
So all of the German expressionist artists that came out of Germany doing horror in Germany in the 1920s silent era are on my list. And luckily, a lot of them fled Hitler, emigrated to America, and got hired in Hollywood, especially by number 7 on my list, Universal Studios.
Oh, yeah.
Very influential. If it weren't for Universal Studios and their canon of classic Frankenstein, Dracula, The Wolfman, Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Excellent movie.
All of them just fabulous movies. And Universal realized, hey, and this is during the Depression, people are willing to pay good money to go to the movie theaters so they can be scared.
Yeah.
And so Universal was the king of horror movies.
Yeah.
From, Dracula was the first real big one, 1931, all the way up until they were even still doing B movies in the 50s.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's when the sci-fi stuff was getting more popular. Like
yes.
The whole aliens and, you had the Thing from Another World and things like that were catching on because then it was about space and what's in space and things like that.
Well, we had
that's
the
what
space race going on.
Yeah, we were afraid of what was going to come to Earth and things like that.
I still am.
My wife is too. You guys would probably have a long conversation about
definitely.
that.
With wearing our tinfoil hats.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And if it weren't for Universal Studios doing all the horror, it wouldn't have inspired Hammer films.
And Hammer films
remake
took it a
them in the
further.
50s and the 60s.
Christopher Lee, and then you had those are great films.
Yeah, but Universal, they hired a lot of those German artists and directors and screenwriters, and there you go.
So you're teaching me something
tonight,
which is really good.
Nice.
Hope I'm teaching you something.
Yeah, absolutely. You're teaching me that your room freaks me the fuck out.
Hey, come on, man! This is a happy room
But-
full of creepy things.
Yes.
Another one on my list that I mean, you've already talked about Halloween and Friday the 13th, but I mean, I have them on my list because I remember seeing Halloween for the first time as a child and being terrified of Michael Myers, but you also have to take into account one of the best parts of the Halloween series is Donald Pleasance.
Oh, yeah.
I think that what I've always said in my reviews and movie reviews about the Halloween franchise is I think as much as I love the films that came after Donald Pleasance unfortunately passed away, I don't think they're as strong as when Donald Pleasance was a part of the franchise. I think he was the heart of the franchise.
He was the glue that tied it together.
Because you were with Dr. Loomis, and he was such a pure man in terms of he was trying to stop evil. And, like when you see the Rob Zombie Halloweens, as much as I do appreciate them and I do like them, the way that Malcolm McDowell played Loomis is he's more of a shyster. He's more of somebody that's trying to get the fame. He wants the notoriety for having, tried to mentor and help the most famous, killer. And that's what his whole angle is. Whereas the Dr. Loomis that Donald Pleasance played was more... He knew that this was something that had to be stopped.
Yes.
And that was his quest. His quest was to stop it.
He was a hero.
Yeah.
A reluctant hero.
Yeah. I mean, he just did it because he knew that he had to, because no one else was going to listen to him. And I think
nobody else could do it.
No one else could. And he was so close to him, having been a psychiatrist for 15 years. And I just think that that's what makes me a fan of the Halloween franchise. As much as I love Michael Myers as a character, I think that the reason why I've latched onto that series and why I think it's such a great series is because of him being in it. Yeah. And I think that he was just and the fact that he would have played Loomis, he said that he would do, because they said, well, how many can you do? I mean, you've done so many of these films, how many can you keep going on? And he says, I can't do it forever. I have to stop at 22. So I always thought that was, like the fact that he was a very famous actor doing, dramas like movies like The Great Escape and things like that. But he was, he cared about this character and he was a part of that franchise. And I think without him, I don't think the Halloween films, if they continue, if they do more, I don't think they'll ever be as good as the ones that he was in. And that's just...
Probably not.
Yeah, so, I mean, I love Halloweens. With Friday the 13th, it's a little bit different for me because as much as I love the original film and the sequel, I didn't get into them as much until Jason became what he is now with the hockey mask. And
undead, unstoppable creature.
Yeah, but even before that, like when Ted White played him in the final chapter, I mean, he was terrifying in that movie. Mm-hmm. Richard Brooker, who passed away last year, played him in part 3, and that was the first time he got the famous hockey mask. And
exactly.
That's when I looked at Jason and go, wow, there's just something... In the second movie, he had the bag on his head, and he was scary, but I think he just became more menacing with that hockey mask. And it's just the fact that the actors that played him got broader and bigger, and there was just something unstoppable about him that I just, as much as I feared him, I eventually became just a big fan of him, because it was like as every entry went on and the more beat up he got, it's almost like the more unstoppable he became, and then it was just sort of like you were rooting for Jason almost.
I think that you're going to find your sentiment in being a fan of Jason just prevalent amongst everybody who's a fan of Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
You ask anybody who's a fan, why are you a fan of Friday the 13th?
Jason.
I love Jason.
Yeah. Who doesn't love Jason? Because Jason is just the unstoppable. He's like Michael Myers on steroids. I mean, he's just... Michael Myers is more of a phantom, and of course they did make him... Larger actors played him. In the first 2 movies, he was played by Nick Castle and Dick Warlock. And then as they went on, you had like George Wilbur and Chris Durand, who played him in H20, but he was a little bit more scaled down. But then you had Brad Laree come in and play him in Halloween Resurrection. And, you had these bigger guys playing him because they were trying to almost compete with Jason. Instead of keeping Michael Myers this sort of normal-looking man, which is what made him so scary in the first 2 films, they started to try to compete with Jason by making him this bigger... and then you had Tyler Mane, who played him in the Rob Zombie ones, and he's gigantic. He's like
huge,
6'8".
dude, yes.
Yeah, and it's huge. But it's like Michael Myers, I think, would have been better if they would have kept him kind of the smaller.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be a gigantic Hulk.
No, because it's just the fact that he's just sort of like he's not. Jason just goes after what he's going to go after, whereas Michael Myers kind of looms in the shadows a little bit more. And I think that's what made him so creepy in the first film, because he just sort of almost plays with his victims before he actually goes after them.
I agree with you, 100%.